Legend whispers of haunting melodies echoing across dark waters, songs so enchanting they could pull even the bravest souls to a watery fate. Tonight we're plunging into the chilling realm of sirens, creatures of myth and nightmare, through 3 terrifying tales that will make you question every distant sound in the dead of night. I remember the nights spent curled up by the fireplace, the scent of burning olive wood mingling with the salty air that drifted in from the open window. My grandfather, a man as rugged as the cliffs of our Amalfi coast, would sit in his worn leather chair, eyes reflecting the dancing flames. His hands, calloused from years of battling the sea, cradled a small glass of limoncello. It was during these quiet evenings that he shared stories of his youth, a tapestry of adventures woven with threads of joy and sorrow. "Nonno," I'd say, "tell me about the sea again." He'd smile wistfully. "Ah, the sea. She is a lover and a thief," he would reply, his voice a gravelly whisper. Most tales were light, filled with the camaraderie of fishermen and the simple pleasures of a life tied to the tides. But there was one story he guarded closely, a shadow that flickered behind his eyes, but rarely reached his lips. It wasn't until I was older, perhaps sensing the sands of time slipping away, that he chose to unveil the secret he'd kept hidden for so long. "It was a night much like this," he began, his gaze distant. The moon hung low, a silver sliver against the velvet sky. The fish had been scarce for weeks, and desperation drove me farther from shore than I'd ever ventured. He paused, taking a slow sip from his glass. The silence stretched between us, thick as the fog that sometimes swallowed the coastline. "I was alone on the water," he continued, the gentle lull of the waves the only sound. "That's when I heard it, a song, soft and alluring, floating on the breeze." A chill prickled the back of my neck. "A song?" He nodded. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard. Voices intertwining in harmony, so beautiful yet so haunting. It stirred something deep within me, a longing I couldn't explain. His fingers tightened around the glass. I should have turned back, but the melody beckoned me forward. Before I knew it, the boat was gliding toward the Siren Islands, the very place our ancestors warned us to avoid. The Sirens, 3 small islands steeped in legend, said to be the home of the Sirens who lured sailors to their doom. As I drew closer, I saw them. He whispered. Figures perched upon the rocks, bathed in the ethereal glow of the moonlight. Their hair flowed like dark rivers over their shoulders, eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. They sang, and every note pulled me deeper under their spell. "What did you do?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He looked at me, a shadow crossing his face. I was powerless. I felt the boat scraping against the rocks, the hull threatening to splinter. In that moment, a sudden swell rocked the vessel, jarring me from the trance. I realized with horror where I was, how close I'd come to... He trailed off, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. With every ounce of strength, I tore my gaze away and grasped the oars. The wind whipped around me, the siren's song rising in desperation. The sea turned violent, waves crashing over the sides, as if trying to claim me for themselves. He shuddered, the memory as vivid as if it had just happened. I rowed until my muscles burned, not daring to look back. The voices faded, replaced by the roar of the ocean and the pounding of my own heart. "How did you make it back?" I pressed, enthralled and terrified. "By some miracle," he said softly. "When I reached the harbor, the storm ceased as abruptly as it had begun. I stumbled onto the dock, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon. No one believed me, of course. They said it was a fisherman's tale, a trick of the mind brought on by exhaustion. He sighed deeply, eyes reflecting the dying embers. But I know what I heard, what I saw. The sirens are real, and they still haunt these waters. We sat in silence, the weight of his confession settling around us. Outside, the waves whispered against the shore, a soothing lullaby that now seemed laced with hidden dangers. "Promise me," he said, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Promise me you'll respect the sea and the mysteries it holds." "I promise, nonno," I replied, my voice steady. Years have passed since that night. My grandfather is gone now. His story's the legacy he left behind. Yet, whenever I walk along the cliffs of Amalfi, the wind carrying the scent of the ocean, I find myself listening intently. And on certain nights, when the moon is a mere sliver and the world is hushed, I swear I can hear it. The faint strains of a melody, ancient and alluring, echoing from the distant islands. The sirens are still singing, and their song is as irresistible as ever. I never thought I'd be the one telling a ghost story, much less living one. But here I am, staring into the bottom of a whiskey glass at a dimly lit bar just off the coast of Maine, trying to make sense of what happened out there. The locals call this place the Sirens' Call, an ironic name given what I've experienced. But maybe that's why I keep coming back, hoping the amber liquid will drown the memories that the ocean keeps spitting back at me. It was a routine assignment, or so I thought. Our ship, the USS Augusta, was docked at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard for some minor repairs. Portsmouth, nestled between Maine and New Hampshire, is a quaint town with a rich maritime history. The kind of place where the sea isn't just a backdrop, it's the lifeblood of the community. Fishermen rise before dawn, and the fog clings to the harbour like a ghost that refuses to let go. We were scheduled for a week-long training exercise along the coast, nothing too strenuous. The crew was in good spirits, eager to get back on the water after being landlocked for maintenance. I was the ship's sonar technician, responsible for the unseen world beneath us. The ocean's depths had always fascinated me, the way it hides its secrets, whispers them in waves and currents that only a few can interpret. The first few days were uneventful. We ran standard drills, tested equipment, and the biggest excitement was a pod of dolphins that raced alongside us one afternoon. But on the fourth night, things began to change. I was on the late shift, monitoring the sonar screens in the dim glow of the control room. The rest of the crew was either asleep or lazily occupying themselves with cards and coffee. The ocean was calm, the kind of stillness that feels like the world is holding its breath. That's when I heard it, a faint sound, almost imperceptible, over the hum of the ship's engines. At first I thought it was interference, maybe a malfunction in the equipment, but as I adjusted the settings, the sound grew clearer. It was a song, soft and melodic, weaving its way through the static. I leaned in, headphones pressing tightly against my ears. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, a series of notes that seemed to resonate deep within me. It was unlike anything I'd ever picked up on sonar before. Whales and dolphins have their own distinct sounds. But this was different. "Hey, Jim," I called over to my colleague, who was flipping through a magazine. "Come listen to this." He sauntered over, taking the headphones from me with a skeptical look. As he listened, his expression shifted from boredom to intrigue. "What is that?" he asked, eyes wide. "I have no idea," I replied, "but it's coming from straight ahead." We plotted the coordinates and realized the sound was emanating from a section of the ocean marked as the Graves, a notorious area known for shipwrecks and treacherous currents. Navy protocols advised caution when navigating those waters, but there was nothing officially restricting us. I reported the anomaly to the captain. Captain Reynolds was a seasoned officer, the kind of man who demanded respect without ever raising his voice. "A song, you say?" he mused, stroking his graying beard. "Probably some underwater currents messing with the equipment." "With all due respect, sir, I've never heard anything like this," I insisted. "It might be worth investigating." He regarded me for a moment before nodding. "Very well. Adjust our course, but maintain a safe distance. Last thing we need is to run aground on some hidden reef." I relayed the orders, and the ship veered slightly, heading toward the source of the mysterious melody. As we got closer, the song grew louder, more intricate. It was as if multiple voices were harmonizing, each weaving a thread into a complex tapestry of sound. The crew began to feel it too, a strange pull, an unspoken tension that settled over us like a fog. Conversations grew hushed, and an undercurrent of unease rippled through the ship. By midnight, we were enveloped in a thick mist. Visibility dropped to near zero, and the only thing piercing the darkness was the haunting song that now seemed to surround us. "All stop!" the captain ordered. The engines quieted down, leaving an eerie silence broken only by the lapping of waves against the hull and that relentless melody. I stepped out onto the deck, the cold sea air biting at my face. The mist was so dense that the ship's bow was barely visible. Then I saw them, shadows in the fog, ethereal figures dancing along the water's surface. I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. But as the seconds passed, the figures became more defined. Women, at least they appeared to be women, with flowing hair and luminescent skin that seemed to glow softly in the darkness. "Do you see that?" a voice whispered beside me. It was Jim, his face pale. Before I could answer, one of the figures turned toward us. Her eyes met mine, and I felt a jolt run through me, a mix of fear and an inexplicable longing. Her lips parted, and the song intensified, each note wrapping around me like a siren's call. "Man overboard!" someone shouted. I tore my gaze away to see a splash in the water. One of our crew members had jumped or fallen into the sea. Panic erupted on deck as more splashes followed. Men were throwing themselves into the water, drawn by some unseen force. "Get them out of there," the captain barked, but his voice was drowned out by the rising song. I felt a hand on my arm, gentle yet firm. I turned to see one of the women standing beside me on the deck, though I hadn't seen her climb aboard. Her eyes were deep pools of darkness, and her voice, though her lips didn't move, echoed in my mind. "Join us," she whispered. I felt myself stepping forward, the edge of the deck looming dangerously close. The cold mist seemed to seep into my bones, numbing my senses. Just as I was about to lose myself to the abyss, a sharp pain jolted me back. Jim had grabbed my shoulder, his fingernails digging into my flesh. "Snap out of it," he yelled, shaking me violently. The spell broken, I stumbled back, gasping for air. Around us, chaos reigned. Those who hadn't jumped were desperately trying to rescue those who had. The figures in the mist began to recede, their song fading but still lingering at the edges of hearing. "Engine full reverse," the captain ordered. The ship lurched as the engines roared to life, pulling us away from that cursed place. We spent the rest of the night recovering the men overboard. Some were found clinging to life rings. Others were unresponsive, their eyes staring blankly into the void. By dawn, we had accounted for everyone, except for 3 sailors who were presumed lost to the depths. A somber mood settled over the ship as we made our way back to Portsmouth. Reports were filed, and an investigation was launched, but no official explanation was ever given. The incident was chalked up to navigational errors and poor weather conditions. But we knew better. Back on land, the crew disbanded. Some took leave, others transferred, unable to face the haunting memories that ship now carried. I tried to return to normalcy, burying myself in work and routine, but the ocean's call was relentless. Nights were the worst. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, echoes of that song ringing in my ears. The line between dreams and reality blurred, and I began to see shadows in the corners of my vision, fleeting glimpses of those figures from the mist. One evening, I found myself drawn back to the harbor, walking along the docks as the sun dipped below the horizon. The water was calm, the surface reflecting the fiery hues of sunset. I heard footsteps and turned to see Captain Reynolds standing beside me. "Can't shake it either, can you?" he said quietly. I shook my head. "What happened out there?" He sighed heavily. "There are things in this world we can't explain. The sea is vast and holds secrets that aren't meant for us." "Do you think they'll come back?" I asked. He gave me a solemn look. "They're always there, waiting. We crossed into their realm, and they don't forget." We stood in silence, the weight of his words sinking in. Eventually, he patted my shoulder and walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Days turned into weeks, and I became obsessed with finding answers. I scoured old maritime logs, folklore, anything that could shed light on what we'd encountered. Tales of sirens, mermaids, and sea nymphs filled the pages, stories dismissed as myths and legends. But myths have a way of holding truth, and I couldn't ignore the parallels. One story, in particular, caught my attention. It spoke of the daughters of the deep, spirits who lured sailors to their doom as retribution for the desecration of the sea. According to the legend, they could be appeased, but never truly satisfied. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to return to the spot where it all happened. It was a reckless idea, but I needed closure. I rented a small fishing boat, equipped it with basic supplies, and set off under the cover of darkness. The sea was eerily calm, the moon casting a silvery glow on the water's surface. As I approached the graves, the fog began to thicken. The boat's engine sputtered and died, leaving me adrift. Panic gnawed at the edges of my mind, but I steadied myself. Then I heard it, the song, faint but unmistakable. The figures emerged from the mist, their eyes reflecting the moonlight. This time I was prepared. "I seek no harm," I called out, my voice trembling. "I come to understand." The song wavered, the notes stretching into a questioning lilt. One of the figures drew closer, her gaze piercing. "Why do you trespass?" Her voice echoed in my mind. "I want to make amends," I replied. "Tell me what you want." She tilted her head, considering. "You cannot undo what has been done." "Then what can I do?" "Remember," she whispered, "tell others of us. Respect the sea or face the consequences." With that, the figures began to fade, the mist dissolving around me. The boat's engine roared back to life on its own, startling me. I took it as a sign, a warning, and a mission. Back on land, I tried to share my story, but it was met with skepticism and concern for my mental state. Official channels dismissed it outright, citing stress and hallucinations, but I know what I experienced was real. So here I am, telling you this tale, not to frighten, but to warn. The sea is more than just water and waves. It holds ancient powers that we barely comprehend. The next time you're drawn to its shores, listen closely. If you hear a song carried on the wind, resist the urge to follow. Some calls are best left unanswered. I finish my drink and step out of the bar. The night air is crisp, the scent of salt strong. The waves crash against the rocks. a rhythmic reminder of forces beyond our control. In the distance, I think I hear a faint melody, but maybe it's just the wind. Either way, I pull my collar up and walk away, leaving the ocean and its secrets behind me. But deep down, I know the sirens are still out there, singing their eternal song, waiting for the next soul to lose its way. I grew up on the misty shores of Chiloé Island, a place where the ocean's whispers blend seamlessly with the folklore passed down through generations. The island, cloaked in evergreen forests and surrounded by the restless Pacific, is a tapestry of myths woven into everyday life. Among these tales, none is more haunting than that of La Sirena Chilota, the Chilote mermaid. My grandmother, Abuela Rosa, was the village storyteller. Her voice, raspy yet soothing, could make even the most fantastical legends seem tangible. As a child, I'd sit at her feet by the crackling fireplace, the scent of burning wood mingling with the salty air seeping through the cracks of our old wooden house. Marisol, she'd begin, her eyes reflecting the flames. The sea is more than water and waves. It holds secrets, some beautiful, others dangerous. One evening, as a storm raged outside, she decided I was old enough to hear the tale that had long been whispered but seldom told in full. The wind howled, rattling the shutters, as if urging her to speak. Many years ago, she started, when I was just a girl like you, there was a fisherman named Matteo. He was brave and kind, but also stubborn. He refused to heed the warnings about venturing too far into the sea alone. I leaned in closer, captivated by her every word. One calm morning, Matteo set sail before dawn, determined to bring back a haul that would feed the village for weeks. The sky was clear, the sea inviting. He paddled farther than he ever had, chasing a school of fish that shimmered like silver beneath the surface. As she spoke, I could almost hear the gentle lapping of the waves against Matteo's boat, feel the cool ocean breeze on my face. Hours passed, and he found himself enveloped by a thick fog. The horizon vanished, and with it, his sense of direction. That's when he heard it, a melody so enchanting it seemed to rise from the depths of the ocean itself. I shivered, the warmth of the fire no longer sufficient. Drawn by the song, Matteo peered over the side of his boat. There, just beneath the surface, he saw her, La Sirena Chilota. Her long dark hair floated around her like seaweed, her eyes deep and knowing. She beckoned to him, her song filling his ears, drowning out all else. Did he follow her? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Abuela nodded slowly. He was entranced. Without realizing it, he leaned further and further over the edge until he tumbled into the cold embrace of the sea. I gasped, gripping the edge of my chair. But that wasn't the end, she assured me. When Matteo didn't return, the villagers grew worried. Days turned into weeks, and hope faded. Then, one night, a young woman named Isabel claimed she saw him at the water's edge. Was it really him? I asked. She believed so. She said he stood on the rocks, gazing out at the sea, his clothes tattered but his face serene. When she called out to him, he turned and smiled before disappearing into the waves. Abuela paused, her expression distant. Some say La Sirena spared him, allowing him to live between worlds. Others believe it was his spirit, forever bound to the sea. The storm outside intensified, the rain pounding like drums. But why would she take him? I questioned, a mix of fear and fascination coursing through me. Legends say that La Sirena guards the ocean and all its creatures, Abuela explained. She punishes those who disrespect the sea, but can also be benevolent to those she deems worthy. I mulled over her words, the tale embedding itself deep within my mind. Years passed, and I carried the story of Matteo and La Sirena with me, a cautionary tale etched into my very being. I grew into a woman, the allure of the sea both a comfort and a warning. I became a marine biologist, driven by a desire to understand the ocean's mysteries while respecting its power. One summer, I returned to Chiloé to conduct research on the local marine life. The village had changed little. The same wooden houses stood proudly against the backdrop of the rolling hills, the scent of eucalyptus mingling with the sea air. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, I decided to take a kayak out to observe nocturnal sea creatures. The water was unusually calm, mirroring the first time Matteo ventured too far. As I paddled, a gentle mist began to rise, shrouding the shoreline. The world grew quiet, the only sound the rhythmic splash of my paddle. Suddenly, a soft melody drifted through the air, so faint I wondered if it was a trick of the wind. My heart quickened. The song grew clearer, each note weaving into the next, with haunting beauty. It was alluring, yet a deep instinct urged me to turn back. Remembering Abuela's tale, I steeled myself, determined not to succumb to the enchantment. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure perched on a nearby rock protruding from the water. My breath caught in my throat. Long dark hair cascaded down her back, shimmering scales glinting in the fading light. La Sirena, I whispered, disbelief and awe colliding within me. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting mine. They were as deep as the ocean, holding secrets untold. For a moment, time ceased to exist. The weight of generations of folklore bore down upon me. She smiled softly, a gesture that was neither inviting nor threatening. The melody shifted, taking on a melancholic tone. It was as if she was sharing a lament, a story of loss and longing. Gathering my courage, I spoke. I respect the sea and all its wonders. I seek only to understand, not to harm. Her gaze held mine for a few seconds longer before she nodded ever so slightly. Then with a graceful dive, she disappeared beneath the waves, the song fading into the whispers of the ocean. I sat there, the kayak gently rocking, unsure if what I had experienced was real or a figment of my imagination. But the damp imprint on the rock where she had sat told me it was no illusion. Returning to the village, I recounted my encounter to Abuela. Her eyes widened, a mixture of fear and pride washing over her. "You were chosen," she said quietly. "She revealed herself to you, a sign that you are connected to the sea in ways we cannot fully comprehend." Word spread quickly, and the villagers regarded me with a newfound respect, tinged with apprehension. Some feared I had been marked, destined to share Matteo's fate. Others believed I had been blessed, a bridge between our world and the mysteries of the deep. In the days that followed, I noticed subtle changes. The marine life around the island flourished. Species long absent began to return. The fishermen reported bountiful catches, yet they heeded the age-old practices of sustainable fishing, wary of incurring La Sirena's wrath. I continued my work, more devoted than ever, to protecting the delicate balance of our marine ecosystem. I advocated for conservation, sharing both scientific knowledge and the legends that held our community together. On quiet nights, when the sky is clear and the ocean is calm, I sometimes hear a faint melody carried on the breeze. It's a reminder, a connection to something greater than myself, a bond forged between a curious woman and the guardian of the sea. Abuela passed away a few years later, but her stories live on. I've become the village storyteller now, weaving tales old and new. And when I speak of La Sirena Chilota, I do so with reverence, knowing that legends are not just echoes of the past, but living threads that tie us to the world around us. So if you ever find yourself on the shores of Chiloé Island, listen closely. The sea has many voices, and sometimes, if you're fortunate, or perhaps chosen, you might hear her song. But remember, the ocean is vast and deep, and not all its secrets are meant to be unravelled. Respect the sea, honour its guardians, and carry its stories with care. For in doing so, you become part of the enduring tapestry that binds us all.